Good morning and afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who are participating on the telephone line via and Zoom, this is Gail Todd with the National Urban Services Coalition, and today's moderator for the Age of Self-Reliance with Jason Matthews is D2 Kasui. Please keep in mind, as a friendly reminder, this is a Q&A session, and we look forward in hearing from you. D2?
Thank you. It is my pleasure to be with all of you today. We got so many folks who are calling in from across the country to hear this young man share some of his insights and wisdom with us. And it's truly a pleasure to be a part of Urban Financial Services Coalition, because one of the benefits of the organization is that we get to hear from some wonderful speakers who are really making a difference in our community and helping to move us forward as an organization and as a community of people of color. So our speaker today is a member of the Million Dollar Roundtable and is the president and CEO of Matthews Financial and Insurance Solutions. He's a native of California, based in Oakland. He began his career in the insurance and financial services industry in 2004 with New York Life Insurance Company. And during his tenure with New York Life, he achieved the prestigious New York Licensed Executive Council in recognition of his outstanding sales results 3 consecutive years in a row. Our speaker was the youngest person to reach the elite executive council ranking during 2 of those 3 years. During the midst of the Great Recession in 2009, our speaker started Matthews Financial and Insurance Solutions, and which is a California firm operating nationally. It specializes in facilitating world-class planning, action, and results for people who receive financial windfalls from inheritance, sales of real estate, business ownership gains, and other financial events, or individuals who receive an NFL contract of $503 million. He definitely helps, Super Bowl winning quarterbacks. As a result-oriented performer, our speaker holds the Million Dollar Roundtable designation as a member of the International Million Dollar Roundtable organization, which is made up of the top 1% of insurance and financial advisors in the world. Our speaker today is the author of the best-selling book, The Age of Self-Reliance, which is available on Amazon.com. Our speaker also serves as the Western Region Vice President and National Board Member of Urban Financial Services Coalition, and has a leadership role with the San Francisco chapter of Urban Financial Services Coalition. As a passionate community professional, our speaker is a board member of the Alzheimer's Services of the East Bay, and he's also a guest columnist for the Sacramento Observer newspaper. He also speaks at events such as San Francisco Small Business Week. And he is married with 2 children. He enjoys baseball, traveling, and his latest hobby is cycling. I don't know where he finds all the time to do it all, but ladies and gentlemen, let's give a big virtual hand clap for my colleague, my friend, your friend, Jason Matthews.
Thank you, D2. You make it sound like I'm busier than what I actually am, I feel like. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Well, that's part of what we do here at Urban Financial Services. It's one place where you can find the love. You can come back home and feel like you're amongst friends, and where you're all a part of the family. And so, Jason, we're going to have a really good, it's like we're having a fireside chat conversation, a little bit about your book and some of your insights about, what is going on in today's, financial market. And we want this conversation to be informal. So those of you, if you end up having a question along the way, you can send a question in the chat. We'll be monitoring the chat for those questions. And then also, if you raise your hand, we will also allow you to be able to ask your question yourself through the raising of your hand virtually, and then we'll get to your question. So Jason, let's start off with why don't you share with us? We just had an extensive, part of your resume that I just shared. I also, want to, before we get down into the deep, pieces of this, why don't you tell us about how you got started with Urban Financial Services Coalition?
The way I got part of the Urban Financial Services Coalition was I went to an event at San Francisco Federal Reserve, and I believe it was an economic summit. And it was the first time I actually seen so many of us in one room in the financial services industry. It was actually an economic summit where they had a panel. I was at the Federal Reserve, and I was just impressed by the experts who were talking, but just having a room of Black professionals in the financial services industry. And this was probably about 10 years ago when this did happen. When I was with New York Life, we did have our African-American, our African-American group, but just seeing people from different institutions, I never seen it before. And I thought it was such a beautiful thing, just seeing so much gathering and hearing experts in the field. One thing I noticed throughout the years, or even during that period of time, was that I never seen us as all the time speaking in front of huge groups. And this event, we had a lot of us, the whole panel was us, and they were speaking to all of us, and they were experts in their field, which is just beautiful to me. And that's what got me started and got me motivated to be part of this organization.
Absolutely. And on one of my trips out to San Francisco, my mom used to live in Auburn, California. I remember, making a short trip to Oakland to meet you for lunch. And I was so impressed with you as a young man with hopes, desires, and dreams. And at that time, you shared with me that one of your goals was to become a member of the Million Dollar Roundtable. And that was so powerful because, you hadn't done it yet, and then you end up having that level of success. What was your key? What was the strategies? What even made you think that you could become a member of the Million Dollar Roundtable? Tell us about that.
Yeah. So what made me think I could be, because I was feeling at the time, why not me? I always say that. Why not me? Who says that somebody else is better than me? And I don't think no one is better for as the advice, the expertise, and the knowledge that I give to my clients. I tell everybody, I used to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I've been slacking on that during COVID, but I used to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and read about the economy, read books about the economy, the financial markets, or just understanding what's happening financially in the world to give advice. And I didn't think nobody else was doing that. And so because of that, I always felt like I deserved to be in there just because of the work that I did and the service I gave to my clients. And so the main thing was my belief system for that, but then also just having a great team around me, not just within my organization, but talking to people like you who gave me great advice, and talking to other CPAs and working in the community, and just being really just focused and dialed into that goal. And one thing I did different that year, and I still do now, is jot down my goals every single day, and then just review those goals on a weekly basis, and figure out what I have to do to get there, which has made a huge impact on me and my practice, and more importantly, in my life because of that, having that team, being focused, and serving and telling people what I am trying to accomplish, which is huge.
Absolutely. And that's very important for, um, anyone to be successful and anyone starting a business to do that. But it's especially important for African Americans to believe it, for us to believe in ourselves and believe that it is possible. And why not us? We have just as much talent, just as much ability as everyone else. And so you're living the dream, you know, and I can say, so how people write a book and they say, yeah, I always believed I could do it, right? But I can say that Jason believed he could do it because he said it 5, 6 years ago, and then he actually made it come into fruition. So we're so proud of the work that you've already done, Jason. And we're even more excited about the things that you're going to do next. So let's kind of transition to your book. What made you think about writing a book, and how did you come up with the title, The Age of Self-Reliance?
One reason I'm an avid reader. I love reading, and my favorite store before baseball, with my son going to the store, buy him baseball equipment like crazy, is Barnes and Nobles. And I used to always go in those business sections, and you'll see books, and they always had a white face, a white author, a white face. And I was like, I know they're not the only ones who could give the advice, and I know I could. There should be somebody who look like us. And my saying is, why not me, right? And I always want to focus on the solution, not the problem. So, and when I wrote this book 5, 6 years ago, what I noticed was, one, that I wanted somebody to look like me in the bookstore, so other people could look like and say, hey, I could become an author who looks like me, who's Black. But the other reason I wrote the book was I remember the 2008 financial crisis. And for me, I grew up, my father passed away when I was 11 years old. I grew up in a single parent household, and my mother growing up in a single parent household, and my father passed away when I was 11. I remember in '08 where she worked for a company for almost 30 years as an auditor. And I remember they shipped her job from Oakland to North Carolina, and she decided to stay in California. And I remember how she got laid off and how hard it was for her to find a job that paid the same. At the same time, I remember seeing people who was your neighbor in '08, '09, decide to move in the middle of the night because of the embarrassment of losing their home. I remember seeing businesses that are folding. And so when I wrote this book, I started realizing that I thought about a lot of our economy is still on shaky ground. Now, I don't really think that we had a true recovery from the '08 financial crisis. The reason being is the people where our debt levels, first of all, drastically increased. So if you look at our national debt, it went from 10 trillion to right now to about 25, 26 trillion. Our corporate debt drastically grew. And in the Bay Area, we are a bubble, and people talk how great we have been during this huge technology boom. But I say that we had a 1.0, internet 1.0, or technology 1.0, which is your Googles, your Apples, and a lot of these startups who made money. But if you look at the last financial crisis, we start having Ubers, we start having Airbnb, we start having these little scooters like Lime, and these guys were making businesses that were unprofitable, but we put them on a throne and say how great they were. And even though those businesses were unprofitable and they didn't have a game to make a profit ever, but they were great at raising money. And because of that, I felt like the next financial crisis was going to be the biggest of our lifetime, because we never learned the lessons from the previous times, and we act like everything was back to normal. And for the people who caused the last financial crisis, they just kept it going like it was nothing without ever being punished.
Absolutely. So basically, you saw that we weren't following the fundamentals of good finance, right?
Correct.
A lot of times, in the economy, there are organizations that are able to raise money, but they're not really making a profit, right?
Right.
So hopefully they're betting on the future that they will eventually make, revenues, and add to the bottom line and go get back to the fundamentals. And that is what makes the economy work. But when that doesn't happen, then people are at risk. And so that was definitely very astute, of you to indicate that, and to, to put that into a book. So when you think about the age of self-reliance, what are the key, top three lessons that you would say individuals should get from reading the book?
One thing is to be conservative is the one key thing right now, which means you should be taking a personal inventory about what resources you have, what money you have coming in, and your expenses going out, and figure out, do you need to make more money or can you save more money and see how long how long your family will survive. The number two thing, the second thing I'll tell everybody, is highly important that you educate yourself by more than just the news. Oftentimes we're listening to the news, but they're not giving us tools and strategies to figure out how can we strive and take advantage of opportunities. Because remember in '08, there was, after the '08 crisis in 2009, 2010, there were people who were buying real estate on pennies of the dollar because they were educated and they had the money or resources to do it. And I think those opportunities will come again, but we have to educate ourselves with it. And I say the third thing you should get from it is to build your tribe or your community of people that you can figure out who you could work with as an investment club, or it could just partner up on doing some different things, or have alliance with those people if you tell them what are you looking for.
Powerful. So let's dive a little bit more into about being conservative. Jason, we live in a bling bling society, live in a society where people want to, floss and keep up, with the Theodis Watsons of the world. How do we, keep our eye on the ball and be more conservative? What's the mindset that's needed to take advantage of that first principle that you shared in your book?
I would say one thing you have to do is you have to make the main thing the main thing. And I feel like oftentimes we get distracted in life and we don't make the main thing the main thing. So we see something that's blingy, we see the commercials, because our society is based off of consumerism. And our society GDP is based off of 2/3 of it, of us purchasing items. So you have to go against the status quo. So in order for that to do that, I think I always say you have to reverse engineer what you want. So I always tell people, look at how in 10 years, how do you want your life to look? 20 years, 30 years, how do you want your life to look like? What obstacles do you want to have to face? And then reverse engineer that and remember that so you can figure out if you want the bling bling or not. So let me give you an example. My son, who is 3 years old, my youngest one, he is autistic. And I always say you pray for the best, but you plan for the worst. So with that being said, I have to plan like he's not going to be able to be fully functional for the rest of his life. So with that being said, I have to make sure I have enough money to say that if he's not able to be self-reliant himself, that I have the money and resources for him. So I have to make sure instead of me buying the bling bling, I want to buy a 2-seater 645 right now. It's summertime. I want to be, and feeling great. But instead of that, I'm thinking about in 20 years, I need to make sure if I'm able to work or not, that I still have enough money so he could be okay and he can live life. And I think if we did that more often and reverse engineer how it looks like as soon as possible, we would not, and keep looking at that, we would not be ready to buy the next big thing, the next flashiest thing, and get caught up in that, because we know we have a goal in mind of what we want, and we reverse engineer to make sure we're on that track, and we keep looking at that goal.
Absolutely, that's powerful. I think Dr. Stephen R. Covey said, begin with the end in mind. So when we look at the future, what I hear you saying is that once we start thinking about the future and what kind of lifestyle that we want to live, then that will inform our decisions today, and help us to, not be caught up on things that are superficial and that will not move us towards that goal. The other part that you talked about in terms of educating ourselves, I would like for you to talk about that a little more, especially from the perspective that a lot of people are still using grandma's and grandpa's investment strategies and financial principles. Why is it important that we become more sophisticated in our knowledge about the of what is available, and how does that play in working with a financial advisor? Our level of knowledge.
Right. So yeah. So let's talk about when grandma and grandpa, uh, when they was thinking about retirement, most of them had a pension, they had Social Security, and had a little bit of savings, and that would allow them to retire. And it was great. And they put the money in their pension. And then in the early 80s, the 401k plan came out, which was first, it was for higher management to lower their tax deductions. But now, as we look at today, we know a couple things. We know that Social Security is not as strong as it used to be. And now during this whole COVID-19, we heard that in 2030, that Social Security was going to become insolvent. It didn't mean that you're not going to get all your money, but you're going to get 75% of it. So, and now during COVID-19, we have 40 million Americans not working, which means less tax revenue actually going towards Social Security during this period of time. So you hear some experts who have said that Social Security now can go shorten up by 2026. And so Social Security benefits might not be there as we promised. At the same time, we had these Trump tax cuts that we're having currently, but those expire in 2025. And the third thing I would say is that we know that the government has printed $5 trillion additional dollars since COVID-19, one through the federal government and some through the Federal Reserve to try to keep this economy going. So with that being said is this, tax cuts are an all-time low compared to when our parents and grandparents retired. Also, our parents and grandparents did not have to think about so much about the retirement because they got a pension plan. They worked at American Steel and got that $5,000, a month, or they worked for General Motors or Ford. While now retirement has went from the responsibility of the employer down to the employee and the individual when we look at that. So with that being said, we need to educate ourselves so we know, one, who should we be talking to? Because one, we might be talking just to our 401k plan provider, but he's not looking at our whole scheme, our whole goal and vision and dreams that we have for ourselves, and also might not know our whole portfolio. He might not know about CDs we might have, extra money in savings, if we receive an inheritance, any real estate we have, or any investments outside of work. So it's important that we educate ourselves so we can ask our advisor the right questions going into what we're trying to receive as our goals.
Absolutely. That's Jason, I think you've laid that out very well. For those who are on the line, we know that our grandparents and, even some of our parents, they had the stability of working for a company 30, 40 years. They get that gold watch, and then they have that potential, that pension. And as part of the pension, they used to take care of your health care insurance. And that's the new shift now. My son is not going to have that. There's very few companies that offer pensions at all. And so people are we're truly in the age of self-reliance, especially for retirement. That's why the name of your book is so timely. Now, what are some resources available that people can use to educate and increase their knowledge about financial services and products?
Yeah, so a couple things I read a lot. I'm a big Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg person, individual. So I read those every morning. I read definitely got to read my book, The Age of Self-Reliance. At the same time, what I will look at are the Social Security report. I think that's a huge thing that people should look at. Also, right now, I'll tell you, listen, you should also look at the Medicare report and then fools.com. I think those are Motley Fool, I should say, .com, because those actually give you great education. Another great book I recommend, besides my book, The Age of Self-Reliance, is read The Power of Zero, be another book as well that you should look at into it. So you really understand the financial services industry, but understand the taxation that's going on. And even though we're talking about the age of self-reliance for retirees, let's look at this today's scenario. Right now, we have about 40 million Americans who are unemployed. And July 24th, the extra unemployment benefits of the $600 a week expires. And we don't know if Congress or Senate is going to extend those. At the same time, even during this COVID-19, there was in a report the other day that a lady got a $325,000 medical bill for surviving COVID-19. But so she don't have the funds for it, and her insurance is not covering it. So even if you're not retired, you're in the age of self-reliance. So that means that you need to read the current as much financial news as possible, and really look at the numbers and stats going forward with it, because those people with unemployment, they're going to have to figure it out after July 24th, and it's going to be hard for small business owners. I talked to one yesterday, and who's a beautician, and she has her shop and her home, and it's going to be very tough for her going forward after August 1st. And we don't know when these things are going to, when the COVID-19 is going to open back up.
Absolutely. So Jason, say, we go out and we read, the information that you mentioned, that we go out and we buy your book. How do we determine the best people to be on our financial board or our team to help us to, navigate and to get good advice on, how do we, properly invest, the resources that we have?
Yeah, so I tell everybody, your team should be a couple people. One thing, you should have a good CPA on your team. And when we talk about good CPA or a good EA or a good tax preparer, we should be finding somebody who are knowledgeable about the industry that you are in and knowledgeable where you feel comfortable in your situation. Oftentimes, not just your your tax person does your taxes or your attorney or your advisor, you have to find something you feel comfortable in, so you express to them your current and whole situation where you don't feel embarrassed. I think oftentimes we feel shy when we're talking to those people because we don't want to be vulnerable. And I think it's highly important that you find somebody you feel vulnerable with. So I think you need to have a good tax preparer, a good attorney, estate planning attorney, and if you're a business owner, a good business attorney. And if you're real estate, a good real estate attorney as well. And you need to have a good advisor. But with that being said, you want to make sure their objectives and principles and values are the same as yours. So when you meet with them, you should do is interview them. And when I meet with my clients, I always say my first meeting is like a first date. I'm trying to get to know you, you trying to get to know me, and see if we should work together. And that's how you should treat all these relationships with these people on your team. Because let's say this person is a huge gold person. Like, you should be, my values as an advisor is to buy gold, buy gold, buy gold. But you might not agree with that. And so you have to figure out what's that person's objectives. Are they feeling like the world's coming to an end, so you should just buy tons of gold? Or is this person might have a value system, a foundation, and their core principle of their business correlates with what you're trying to accomplish, and that's the main thing.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jason. Having a team, is very important. So many of us, try to do it alone. Oh, we can do it. You don't have time to read all the books, right? You don't have time to study all of the, you can't study estate, you can't study being an accountant, you can't study, all these things, but you can study having a good researching and getting the right members on your team, and then allowing them to give you the particular advice you need to be successful. So Jason, when a person has gotten their team together, when do you know when it's time to, promote your team? Because sometimes we're at a certain level, right? Say you get started with some folks and, we want to be loyal, right? But there's also times when we grow and, you might need another level of expertise. When do we know that, and how do we transition or upgrade our team as necessary?
I think that boils down to when the people cannot start answering the questions or cannot help you reach your goals or objectives you're trying to accomplish. Because life changes, our goal changes, and our values do change. And when that person goals or values and objectives does not correlate with yours, I think it's time to possibly upgrade. So, give you an example, you might be working with the CPA at first when you first started, when you was 21, 22, doing your taxes, and that was great. They did 1040 and that was it. But now you're a small business owner. You're trying to maximize your deductions. So with that being said, this person doesn't know all the deductions you can take. Now might be time to move to another tax advisor who could give you the answers and knowledge you look for. Just like your banker, oftentimes I read a report that a lot of us did not get the PPP money. One reason is that the bank that we went to did not want to do the PPP loan at first. So it might have been highly important to know that I might have to shift and change my relationship with a banker who understand my resources, I feel like, because now my situation has changed and the bank I was at could no longer handle that. And that's the same with your advisor, any advisor that's on your team. Sometimes you have to upgrade and change and promote as you change in your life, which is fine. It's business. And it's good to have those relationships with those people and not burn that bridge, because you never know when they want to come back in your life. But at the same time, we have to understand those people might not be able to help me in this particular situation. And it's time to make me a shift or like Beyonce say, make an upgrade. So, yes.
Absolutely. Obviously, they didn't have Theodis Watson or Ola Trulove as their bankers, because they would have been taken care of. They would have got plenty of money and they would have got it on time when they really needed it.
Yes, sir. I totally agree with you on that. Yes, sir.
Absolutely. I'm gonna ask you one more question, Jason, and then I'm going to take some questions from the audience. And so after I ask Jason this question and he answers, you can either raise your hand virtually to ask your question, or you can send it in the chat and I'll ask the question for you. So Jason, here's my question to you. What do you think is for Henry's, high income earners, not yet rich? What are some of the top 3 mistakes they make in terms of investing?
Top 3 mistakes. One is not tax diversifying their portfolio. So what I mean by that is, oftentimes what I see is they only contribute towards their tax deferred bucket, which means their 401k plan, IRAs, which means you get the tax deduction today, the money grows tax deferred, and when they pull out the money, they're going to pay taxes on during retirement. Oftentimes, I realize is that they think that they're going to be in a lower tax bracket when they decide to retire. But oftentimes, it's actually the opposite. They're in a higher tax bracket. And the reason being is this. One thing is their home they're paying more of the principal than their interest. So they don't get the home mortgage interest deduction like they used to. Also, their second biggest deduction the biggest deduction is their children, and the children are now grown up. So that's one reason why. And the second thing is we don't control tax laws or what tax rates are. Those are ran by Congress and the president. And with that being said, right, like we said, we're at about $25 trillion national debt. We have states and local municipalities having huge financial issues during COVID-19, which they were already having already, but that goes a little bit deeper. So we have to plan ahead and say, hey, I need to taxify, not just put money in my employer retirement plan, but I need to also put money and diversify and have some money in my tax-free bucket, where if when I do retire, I can pull that money out tax-free and have some in my tax-deferred bucket so I can lower my taxable income. The number 2 thing I say especially is that right now, when they say America gets the sniffles, we catch the flu as a community, as a people. And with that being said is, we think that we're going to be able to retire oftentimes at 65, 70 years old and continue to get these pay increases. But what I've realized is, as we get older, they start laying off us and we face age, not just race discrimination, but age discrimination. And so the pay that we usually get is not the same as we normally do. So if you're used to making 150, you think you're going to make 150 plus inflation every year going to retirement. But what happens is many of us get laid off and we don't get paid the same. So what I tell people is we have to make our time horizon for retirement not 65 or 70 like we think where we hear on the paper. Well, we should really make our retirement at a younger age, because oftentimes we're laid off and now we face age discrimination and we don't ever get paid the same. And this is across America, but it really affects our community more than any other group. So instead of saying, hey, my retirement age is 65 like everybody else, we should plan ahead and say, no, my retirement age is going to be 60, and let's plan for that and say, hey, my income might be 50 to 60% of what it was, or 70%. And we know friends who are going through this. All of us are. And then the third thing that we high income earners is that, especially in our community, we are responsible for multiple people who actually do not live in our household. And sometimes we have to learn how to say no. In our community, when you're a higher income earner, oftentimes we have to make sure that that mom is taken care of, because her mom is taken care of. We have to make sure our children are taken care of even when they're adults. And sometimes it's hard to say it, but we have to say no at a certain point and have those people eventually fend for ourselves. Because what happens is we lack the savings to make sure that we're adequate for ourselves. So what happened is we helping out our kids at 30, 35 years old, and we're helping out our parents, but we have no money to actually save for ourselves. And everybody really looks at us as a money bank because we're the high income earner. And then the last note or bonus I would say is we have to make sure within our plans, retirement plans, that we have a long-term care plan. When I say the age of self-reliance, it's not just taking care of ourselves, but it's about taking care of our whole family. Because I feel like because of technology, globalization, not all of our kids are going to be able to work or be self-sufficient and get paid a natural increase. When I see planning and I see other communities, I see a huge wealth gap. I see a wealth gap of us because of not just income, but of wealth of handouts. I'm in a Bay Area, and we have $800,000 homes. We throw out like nothing, $900,000 homes. But it's crazy when I see other communities where the kids are getting $300,000 down payment, $400,000 down payment. While we're struggling, while we're just making income and we're just doing down payment assistance, so we can never qualify for those homes, which I think is another further redlining to get a little bit more technical. But the reason why we need to do long-term care planning is the money we can get passed down to our kids are now going to long-term care facilities, because we're not talking about long-term care planning. And we have to talk about, if I get sick, who's going to take care of me? Is it going to be my kids? Can they afford to take care of me even though they have student loans? Is it going to be a facility? How much does that cost? Because in California, I know if you have somebody come to your home right now, it's going to be $5,000 to $6,000 a month. And 70% of people 65 or older will have a long-term care, will be needing long-term care at some point in their life. And $6,000 a month, you times that by 12, that's $72,000. If you go to a facility, which none of us want to ever go to, but it's $10,000 a month, average across the country. So that's $120,000 a year. That kills people retirement and inheritance that they're supposed to give to their kids. So I think is important, not just during Thanksgiving, just playing dominoes and talking smack or spades or whatever your guys' game of choice is, but it's also important that we talk about long-term care planning. How am I going to take care of myself if I get sick? Is it everybody's going to contribute to make sure that we're okay if we get sick and we have somebody come to our house? Maybe it's saying, hey, I know my kids know I'm going to move in with them, and I might need their help a couple days a week, and they can still live their life. It's something we have to talk about that we're not talking about enough.
Absolutely, Jason. I mean, I think that you definitely hit that on the head with the bonus round. We're living longer than a lot of our parents have, and so our retirement time frame, is easily 15, 20 years. And then if we don't have the resources to take care of ourselves, and if we spent all that money taking care of Junebug and little Lulu, or we co-signed on, the student loan for, a student that's on their 8th year in college, then that becomes things that are very difficult. I got a couple questions in the chat, Jason. Is what do we do if we're already at the age of 65 and look good, and people can't even tell that I look 65? What do I do? And if I'm still working and I plan on retiring, and I would like to retire.
So what I would do is first of all, when I look at retirement, you should do one thing. Let's figure out what is my basic expenses to live every month. Is that $3,000 a month? Is that $4,000 a month? Is $5,000? $10,000? Okay. Let's figure out that basic expenses for me to live. Now, after I figure out my basic expenses, the next thing I should do is let's figure out how much income do I have coming in if I decide to retire. How much I get from my Social Security, how much I come from my pension. And then let's even reverse engineer that more. When I retire, is it just saying I'm working full-time, or I'm going to stop working, period, or am I working part-time? So to give you an example, my mother and a couple of my clients, they retire. But to keep their socializations, or my mother was, now I told her she had to quit. My mother, to keep her socialization skills, worked at Lowe's. She loved the discount. She loved the discount because she loved fixing up her backyard, buying new appliances like crazy. So if we look at our basic expenses and we say $5,000, but you're working part-time because you don't want a job that have any responsibility when you come home, that's what my mother says. I don't want to worry about the job when I come home. I just want to do that a little bit, walk out, and I don't care. I don't need this job. And so that's my mother from Monroe, Louisiana. So with that being said, we'll add into your Social Security, your pension, and if you are going to work part-time, but part-time as well. After that, we have to figure out if there's any basic income gap. So let's say with Social Security and your pension, and let's say you're part-time, you have $4,000 coming in, but your total expense is $5,000. So we need $1,000 coming in. We have to look at our total portfolio and use a portion of that and say that's going to cover my basic expenses. And if that part can cover your basic expenses, great. And now one thing I tell people is when you say it's cover my basic expenses, you should look at, do I need to put that basic expenses, do I need to put a portion of my retirement plan, what I mean like your 401k plan or your IRA, should I put that towards a lifetime income annuity? Should it be stock dividends, or is that going to be real estate that could cover that gap for me so I can have enough passive income to live? After that, any remaining money in your retirement accounts should cover your inflation as it goes during the years. Because, gas at $1.50 now, or I should say steak, because steak went up drastically lately. When you bought steak 5 years ago, nice ribeye, tomahawk, it was like, $3 a pound. Now it's like $5 or $6 a pound. So we have to make sure the rest of our remaining money can grow to keep up with inflation of gas, the movies, the steaks. I love eating steaks and lobster put on this nice smoker to keep up with those.
Absolutely, Jason. You got to be able to get a good steak. You know what I'm saying? You got to be able to put a little something aside for a good steak. Maybe not every day, but at least once a month, at least once a quarter, something.
Not every day. Not every day.
Not every day. Here's another question that we have. If someone feels comfortable with short-term and long-term retirement investments, what recommendations would you have if someone wants to build their intermediate income and investment portfolio?
That's a great question. So they want to build up first thing we have to look at is what is your goals and objectives with that intermediate. And what I mean by that is, are you a risk taker? Do you want to be more conservative? And what's our time horizon? So when I say short-term money, we have our emergency fund, which is 3 to 6 months is our emergency fund. After that, usually when you hear a portfolio or when we talk about stocks, your time horizon is usually 7 years. Now, if you're saying that money should be 10 years or not, what we can look at is a couple things. One, we can look at, if you're conservative, there's a couple things. One, we can look at cash value life insurance using a whole life or index universal life. Also, we can look at certain treasuries as well, 10-year treasuries, or what we call strips, which it will give us, our money will grow, including interest over that period of time. If you're more aggressive, what you might want to do is look at certain stocks that you feel like have positive cash flow, which means these companies are going through the wear time and know how to still build up positive cash flow in a recession or without a recession. And so you want to look at what companies are those. Or what you might say is, I might do what they call segment rotation, which is certain stocks that might rotate during the market, during cyclical times, that I think it might be great. For example, right now, we're in COVID right now. And with COVID, and this is one thing I personally did, during COVID, we know everybody's in the home and there's no cure for COVID. And we see more and more people working out, and they're working out indoors, especially as it get colder. And some people are going to be using or on the Pendleton bike. If you don't know about it, it's a cycling bike and it has the visuals, make you look like you're riding. You see some of your friends. So I personally bought some Pendleton stocks personally in my portfolio, just because I know they're going to be good, I say, for the next 6 months until COVID's out as well. So that's what I reckon. And so I will look at companies that are still generating cash flow, then reassessing as soon as COVID is over with, where I should move those money to companies that have positive cash flow. I don't invest or recommend telling people to invest with companies that don't have positive cash flow. But that's a personal standpoint. I'm not an Uber fan. I'm not a Airbnb fan. I'm not in any company that doesn't produce profits. I feel like business is made to make money at the end of the day. And if you're not, you're just a great Ponzi scheme in my eyes, legally or illegally.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Jason. I have another question from the chat. What are some factors that people should watch for to make sure they have a good plan when using a robo-advisor?
So we heard last week or 2 weeks ago, you had the gentleman who killed himself because he thought he lost $750,000 using Robinhood. I think that the problem with using robo-advisors is they don't know your total situation. So before you work with a robo-advisor, I'll recommend that you know your total situation by asking yourself or asking an advisor, what is my total situation? What's my goals and objectives? And what roadfalls or issues I'm going to have on the way? Oftentimes, we go to these robo-advisors and they can't tell us our whole situation. For instance, if I know I have a mother sick and they don't consider that, they should. So that's the problem with robo-advisors. But if we're doing it on our own and we're going to robo-advisors, you have to figure out your end game is, what goals and objectives you have, and what roadblocks or speed bumps you're going to have on your way so you can properly plan for that.
Absolutely. And while we're talking about robo-advisors, Jason, could you talk a little bit about Bitcoin and when, what type of investor, should be looking at Bitcoin or should be staying away from Bitcoin?
Bitcoin, I would say, is great. Bitcoin, I wouldn't say is great. Bitcoin is for somebody who could deal with volatility. If you look at the history of Bitcoin, it is very volatile. It goes up, down very drastically. So you're going to have to be a person who could ride the wave of Bitcoin. It should not be, and I think people do Bitcoin and certain things as a get-rich scheme. When you put money in Bitcoin or things like this that are unproven, that's not backed by anything, we should expect the volatility and be willing to hang into the volatility. And what I mean by that, you might see Bitcoin at 1,000, then all of a sudden it might crash to 200, and then it might go back up. you're going to have to be a person who's able to ride that wave and stress. If not, don't do it. I don't believe Bitcoin should be actually your whole retirement plan. I don't think it should be a good portion. It should be a bit of enough money that you're okay with the volatility. My mother used to say growing up, you should never allow somebody let somebody borrow enough money that you're going to stress out about. And that's how I feel about Bitcoin.
Absolutely. Because, a lot of times, we hear these new things and we get these new ideas and, and it's always like the barbershop or down at the car wash, someone talks about, hey, I just made all this money in Bitcoin, right? And a lot of times we get excited about the new thing, but we don't always, get all the information and make sure the new thing is right for us. And so really, working with an advisor like yourself to get good advice and to, like you mentioned earlier, have the full picture looked at, would be good, prudent advice. I have another question here is for the COVID, between now and the end of the year, where do you think are some good opportunities for people to be investing their money in?
So let's look at COVID right now. And I think this is where it's important that we look at how has life changed during COVID. And so when we look at investing, and one thing I would say when we look at investing is how has life changed? So what are you people using more and what people are not using? And what companies do you think are being affected negatively and the companies are effective positively? The reason why I said Pendleton as an example was because I know people are going to be at home, and instead of going to the gym, which are people are scared because of health reasons, they can get on the Pendleton bike, work out at home, and they be okay. So then that means let's look at companies who are still figuring out how to make money during this whole period of time. So companies we might want to look at who might be generating money are companies who are positive cash flow. One thing, always positive cash flow, but sources that we're using. For instance, Zoom is booming right now. Why? Because people are now on Zoom calls. So we should look into Zoom. I'm not saying buy Zoom, I'm not giving a recommendation, but let's look at Zoom. People are at home and they're watching TV right now. We should possibly look at Netflix. But what's it a common sense issue Netflix and Hollywood is going to have? People are not working. So we're going to see less and less films get made on Netflix, Disney Plus, and so on. So how does that affect us? Who else is making money or taking advantage of opportunities? Because remember, when there is blood in the streets, somebody's making money. And we should figure out who's making money during this time. Don't be negative thinking the world is going to end. But let's think about it like, who's taking advantage of this? If you look at reports, Home Depot and Lowe's is doing great because people are fixing up their houses because they want to feel comfortable right now. They want to feel plush right now. So more and more people are fixing up their home. So we have to go back and figure out who is making money and then investigate and look at those companies, look at their financial statements, and then be willing to invest in those companies. But make sure they align with their goals and objectives. Some of those companies might be growth companies. Some might be income, might have an income or value. But you have to look at, do that match with what I am trying to accomplish? And that's where an advisor will kick in and tell you, yeah, that helps you out. This is going to help you reach your goal or not. So, and this is a great conversation you can have with your advisor about it.
Absolutely. Jason, it's 12:57. One of the things that Gail told me, and matter of fact, she's always, when we had the prep call, she said, D2, make sure you end on time. So Gail, we're going to end on time. But Jason, I would like to end with this, final question for you to share is, how would you like to be remembered?
I would like to be remembered as a brother who cared about his community, who not just cared, but really worked on enhancing our community. I think right now our community financially, economically are in dire straits overall. And I want to be a person who fixed that situation and make sure our community is enhanced when it's all said and done, that we're doing better than we did yesterday, and that we can keep, and based off of my role into the community that our community is doing better. We're better educated, and we're more self-reliant as well, with more businesses and banks and everything across the board who looks like us. And I was able to do something to make that change happen.
Absolutely. And I would dare say, Jason, that you are living your legacy. You're making a difference each and every day. We appreciate the leadership that you're providing in the San Francisco chapter. We appreciate the energy and excitement that you're bringing to the national organization. We appreciate the fact that you took your ideas and you put it down into a book. And I would encourage everyone who's on the call, if you haven't purchased Jason's book, please go out to Amazon.com, purchase his book. We want to not only support Jason because he's a member of Urban Financial Services Coalition, but we also want to encourage and promote more African Americans to write in this space. We have a unique story to tell. We are uniquely positioned to talk to our community about finances and how we can empower each other. And we can do that more and more by supporting each other when we write in this space. And so our next View from the Top session is going to be in September. We're going to have Mr. Kalai Gibson, who is Executive Vice President at Fifth Third Bank. He will be talking about leadership and purpose. How do you get to the C-suite? So please be on the lookout for your email and the UFSC national website for information and marketing on that event. And then next week, we're going to have our Wednesday session. We're going to feature some really exciting individuals who have been in the game for a while that's going to share their experience. Mr. Otis Watson is going to be one of our panelists. We're going to have Ms. Julia Giles from Denver. And then we're also going to have Mr. Skinner out of New York. So we're going to tap into some of our seasoned members to give some of their perspectives on, how do we position and take advantage and move ourselves forward. So with that, everybody, please unmute yourself and say good afternoon or good morning and say goodbye and thank Jason for a wonderful presentation.
Bye-bye.
Great job, Jason.
Bye. Really good.
Thank you, Jason. Good job.
Jason, way to go, Jason.
Excellent job.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time, Jason.
Definitely.
Yes. Awesome, awesome, awesome.